Hello, my name's Scott Delahooke. Uh, my wife is Mona, and Mona Delahooke was a patient at Keck USC starting around the 22nd or 23rd of August, and she was in ICU for about 4 to 5 weeks, down to the 6th floor, and then went to a respiratory rehab facility afterwards. Just wanted to say a couple of quick things. First, an incredible shout out to Keck USC, Dr. Bulich, Dr. Emmanuel, Dr. Kim, unbelievable miracle workers. Um, the nursing staff was top notch. I can't name them all, but they're, Clara, Crystal, Sunny, Angel night nurse Melissa, who watched over Mona and allowed us to get some sleep many nights during this difficult journey. Loved Ishmael and Maria, the security guards downstairs. They would swing by, check on us, make sure we were okay. Even Dr. Tenser, who was in the cath lab and going up into Mona's artery in her brain, and when there was vasospasms, injecting medication, just miracle workers, all of them. I'm so grateful on every level. Here is my 10,000 foot elevation view, and I journaled for the last 6 months, but the bottom line is, in our experience with Mona, who had about as bad a brain bleed as you can have into the corpus callosum, one of the most sensitive parts of the brain, is regardless of what the presenting patient looks like, assume competence, assume the ability to hear and sense everything going on. When this brain bleed happened, clearly the communication between her brain and her body stopped. Everything was limp, weak. When the neurologist would come by and pinch her and try and get a response, there was no response. But every single day, starting at about day 2 or 3 in the ICU, as directed by some of my wife's clients who are PT, OT, speech and language folks, they said, talk to her as you're touching different parts of her body and let her brain know what you're touching. So every day for weeks and weeks with no response initially, every time we touched a big toe on the left foot, we would say that. Next to the big toe, all the way down her toes, the top of her foot, the bottom of her foot, her heel, we would be gently touching these places all the way up her knees, her hips, all the way up to her shoulders, on her face, on her ears. We were constantly, all the time, talking to her about what we were touching and communicating that those parts of her body are going to learn to reconnect to her brain so that the communication would gently, slowly over time begin to open up. And it took weeks and weeks. But without question, her incredible recovery, in my mind, was due in large part to the narrating we did to her brain and body of what we were touching. The other thing I did with my wife, and she has mentioned it to me later, she had all these machines, all of the sirens, everything going off, and she was constantly bombarded with sound stimulation, even though her eyes were closed. And I said to her multiple times every day in that 5-week, 6-week period, every noise you hear is there to protect you. It doesn't signal danger, it signals safety. And the theme of safety and being held by all of the tremendous staff, being cared for by this cadre of angels, doctors and nurses and technicians, everyone that came in to see her, we asked them to talk to her as if she was having a conversation back, even though she wasn't, and to let her know when they are going to be touching or putting a needle in, just narrating everything that's happening. And her recovery has been breathtaking. It's the prayers that surrounded her, the love that surrounded her was incredibly important as well. All of it mattered. But the slow rebuild of the sensory connections from brain to body, I think, were profound. And I would love to see every ICU room, every ICU patient have someone that would come in, not a traditional PTOT or speech and language therapist, but have someone come in that would, an hour in the morning, maybe an hour in the afternoon, do this mapping process, speaking in a calm, assuring voice, and mapping the different parts of their body as their brain is trying to slowly reconnect. Because that's the other thing, that the physical therapists and the occupational therapists would come by, lovely folks, but they said we can't do anything with her until she's awake and she can communicate. Well, I challenge that. I think we can do better. I think this constant touch and verbal communication of all of the limbs and the extremities. I did it. I kissed her forehead and kissed her nose and kissed her ears several times a day, telling her what I was kissing. And that was on her face, right? All of that mattered. And I would encourage every ICU, neuro ICU department, have a trained individual who does nothing but this sensory narration as soon as possible after a TBI. Grateful for all of you. I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you. God bless you all. You are doing work that is saving lives and changing lives in a very personal way for us, but in an important way for everyone. Thank you again.